The massive warship Steadfast drifted silently through the darkness of space, its hull scarred and blackened. Pieces of metal and debris floated around it like a cloud of dead butterflies. To any watching eyes, the ship looked like just another casualty of the ongoing war between humans and the Coalition. Inside the bridge, Captain James Walker stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main view screen with steady eyes. The bridge was dark, lit only by the dim glow of essential systems running on minimal power. The air was cold. They'd shut down all non-critical systems to maintain their cover. "Status report," Walker whispered, though there was no real need for silence in space. Old habits died hard. "All systems nominal, Captain," replied Tom from his engineering station. His fingers danced across the darkened console, making microscopic adjustments to keep their power signature as low as possible. "The fake hull damage is holding up perfectly. Anyone scanning us will see exactly what we want them to see." Walker nodded slowly. The damage to their ship had taken weeks to prepare. Every blast mark, every torn piece of hull plating had been carefully designed to look real while protecting the vital systems underneath. It was an elaborate trap, and everything had to be perfect. "Movement detected, sir," called out Lisa from the sensor station. Her voice was tight with anticipation. 3 Coalition battlecruisers just dropped out of hyperspace. They're at the edge of the sector, about 30 minutes out at their current speed. Walker allowed himself a small smile. "Right on schedule." "Status of our reactor?" "Cold but ready," Tom responded. "We can go from 0 to full power in 15 seconds. The bridge crew worked in near silence as the minutes ticked by. They'd trained for this mission for months. Every person knew their role, knew exactly what to do when the time came. The plan was simple but dangerous: appear helpless, draw in the enemy, then strike when they least expected it. The Coalition ships grew larger on their screen. They were impressive vessels, each one nearly twice the size of the Steadfast. Their hulls gleamed with polished metal, decorated with the red and gold markings of the Coalition fleet. They moved with the confidence of predators who'd spotted easy prey. "They're scanning us," Lisa reported, reading standard salvage protocols. "They think we're dead in the water." Walker watched as the enemy ships spread out in a standard salvage formation. It was exactly what they'd hoped for. The Coalition's arrogance working against them. They never expected a human vessel to be a threat, especially not one that appeared so badly damaged. "Incoming transmission," said Mike from communications. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Let's hear it," Walker ordered. A deep, authoritative voice filled the bridge. "Attention, disabled vessel. This is General Reed of the Coalition fleet. Your ship is now under our control. Do not attempt any hostile actions. We will begin boarding procedures shortly." Walker didn't respond. The silence would make them think the Steadfast's communications were damaged. He watched as small dots began to appear on the tactical display, boarding shuttles launching from the Coalition ships. "Multiple boarding craft detected," Lisa confirmed. "They'll be in weapons range in 5 minutes." The tension on the bridge rose with each passing second. Walker could feel his crew's anticipation, their eagerness to spring the trap. But timing was crucial. They had to wait until the Coalition ships were fully committed. "Sir," Tom whispered urgently, "one of the false hull plates is shifting. If it moves too much, they might detect our active systems underneath." Walker frowned. This was the risk with their plan. One small detail could give everything away. "Can you stabilize it?" "Working on it," Tom replied, his fingers flying over his console, rerouting minimal power to the magnetic clamps. "There. That should hold it." The boarding shuttles grew closer. On the main screen, Walker could now make out their details: sleek, predatory craft designed to cut through a ship's hull and deposit troops. The Coalition believed in overwhelming force, using superior numbers to crush any resistance. "Enemy vessels holding position," Lisa reported. "They're in perfect formation for salvage operations." She paused, checking another reading. "Sir, they've lowered their shields. They're not expecting any resistance. Walker allowed himself another small smile. Everything was falling into place. The Coalition's biggest weakness was their pride, their absolute certainty that humans were inferior. That pride was about to cost them dearly. "All hands," Walker said quietly into the ship's internal comm system. "Final positions. Prepare for Operation Phoenix." Throughout the massive ship, hundreds of crew members tensed in readiness. In the engine room, engineers stood ready at their stations, prepared to bring the reactor to full power. In the weapon bays, gunners sat at their posts, weapons pre-targeted on the Coalition vessels. Every system, every weapon, every person was ready. The boarding shuttles were now less than a minute away. Walker could imagine the Coalition troops inside, probably joking among themselves about how easy this mission would be. They'd be expecting to find a dead ship, maybe a few survivors to take prisoner. Instead, they were flying straight into the jaws of a trap. 30 seconds to optimal range, Lisa announced. Walker straightened his uniform, a gesture that his crew recognized. They all tensed, ready for his command. 20 seconds. The Coalition ships loomed large on their screens now, their weapons dormant, their shields down, their boarding shuttles exposed. They'd positioned themselves perfectly, exactly where the Steadfast's weapons would do the most damage. 10 seconds. Walker took a deep breath. Months of preparation had led to this moment. One way or another, they were about to change the course of the war. 5 seconds. The boarding shuttles were almost touching the Steadfast's hull now. In moments, they would attach their cutting tools and begin burning their way inside. "Mark." Walker's voice rang out clear and firm. "Execute Operation Phoenix." The bridge erupted into activity. The main lights blazed to life as the reactor surged from dormant to full power in seconds. Throughout the ship, the false hull plates fell away, revealing pristine armor and fully operational weapon systems underneath. The Steadfast transformed from a dead hulk into a fully armed warship in the blink of an eye. On the Coalition ships, alarms would be blaring. But it was already too late. The Steadfast's weapons were powered up and locked on target. The trap was sprung, and the real battle was about to begin. Walker allowed himself one final moment of satisfaction before giving the order that would change everything. "All batteries. Fire at will." The Steadfast's weapons blazed to life, streaks of brilliant energy bursting from its hull. The Coalition boarding shuttles never stood a chance. Half of them vanished in balls of fire, while the others scattered like startled birds, desperately trying to return to their motherships. On the bridge of the lead Coalition ship, General Reed stared in disbelief at his tactical display. The supposedly dead human vessel had transformed into a fully armed warship in seconds. His perfectly planned salvage operation was turning into a nightmare. "Shields up. Battle stations." Reed roared, but he knew they were already too late. His ships were in the worst possible position, arranged in a salvage formation that left them exposed to enemy fire. They'd walked right into the humans' trap. Back on the Steadfast, Captain Walker was calling out orders in rapid succession. "Target their engines first. Don't let them reposition. Tom, give me everything you can from the reactor. Lisa, keep those jamming fields up. I don't want them calling for help." The space around them lit up with weapons fire. The Steadfast's main guns pounded the nearest Coalition ship, its shots finding weak points in the enemy's hastily raised shields. The Coalition vessel shuddered under the impact, pieces of its armor plating torn away by the force of the blasts. "Sir," Lisa called out from her station, "they're trying to coordinate their defense, but our jamming is keeping them from synchronizing their shield frequencies." Walker nodded grimly. This was another part of their plan. The Coalition ships relied heavily on working together, combining their shields and coordinating their fire. By disrupting their communications, the Steadfast was forcing each ship to fight alone. The bridge rocked as return fire finally started coming in. The Coalition ships were recovering from their surprise, bringing their powerful weapons to bear, but they were still out of position, their shots not nearly as effective as they could have been. Shields holding at 85%, Tom reported. Those hits aren't as strong as they should be. They still haven't got their weapons fully powered up. Walker watched as another salvo from the Steadfast struck home. The Coalition ship to their right was in serious trouble, its engine section sparking and venting atmosphere. But the other two vessels were starting to maneuver, trying to get into better firing positions. "Sir," detecting power surge from the lead ship, Lisa warned, "they're charging their main weapon array." "Roll ship, present our reinforced ventral armor," Walker commanded. The Steadfast turned gracefully in space, just as a massive beam of energy shot from the Coalition flagship. The blast struck their armored underside, the impact making the whole ship vibrate. Damage report. Shields down to 60% on the ventral side, but armor held. Tom called back. "That was their best punch, Captain. They won't be able to fire that weapon again for at least 3 minutes." Walker allowed himself a tight smile. "Then let's make those 3 minutes count. All batteries, concentrate fire on the damaged ship. Let's take one of them out of the fight." The Steadfast's guns spoke again, this time focusing all their fire on the wounded Coalition vessel. Its shields, already weakened, couldn't withstand the barrage. Explosions bloomed across its hull as vital systems were hit. On the Coalition flagship's bridge, General Reed was furious. "How?" he demanded. "How did they hide all this? Our scans showed nothing." His tactical officer, looking shaken, tried to explain. "Sir, they must have developed some new kind of stealth technology. The damage we saw, it was all fake, carefully designed to hide their real capabilities." Reed slammed his fist on his command chair. The humans had outplayed him completely. His arrogance, his certainty that no human ship could threaten his force, had led them right into this trap. And now one of his ships was about to be destroyed. The damaged Coalition vessel's engines finally gave out. It started drifting, emergency pods launching from its sides, as the crew abandoned ship. The other two Coalition ships tried to move to protect their stricken companion, but the Steadfast's superior position made it impossible. "Enemy vessel is disabled," Lisa reported with satisfaction, reading multiple hull breaches and critical system failures. "She's out of the fight, sir." Walker nodded. "Good. Now for the others. Tom, how's our power holding up?" "Reactors running hot but stable, sir. We can keep this up." The battle continued to rage. The remaining Coalition ships were fighting harder now, their initial shock replaced by desperate determination. Energy beams and projectiles crisscrossed the space between the vessels, some finding their marks, others disappearing into the void. The Steadfast took another hard hit, this one catching them on the port side. Warning alarms blared as damage reports came in. "Port shield generator is struggling," Tom announced. "We've got damage control teams responding, but we need to protect that side." Walker studied the tactical display. The Coalition ships were trying to flank them, to get to their weakened port side. But that movement was also an opportunity. "Lisa, do we still have the port missile tubes?" "Yes, sir. They're operational." "Load them with our special packages. Let's give our friends another surprise." The Coalition ships pressed their attack, thinking they'd finally found a weakness to exploit. They didn't notice the missile tubes opening on the Steadfast's port side until it was too late. The missiles that launched weren't ordinary weapons. As they approached the Coalition ships, they suddenly split apart, each one releasing dozens of smaller projectiles. These weren't designed to explode. They were electronic warfare devices, tiny but powerful jammers that attached themselves to the enemy ships' hulls. The effect was immediate. The Coalition vessels' shields began to flicker and fail as the devices interfered with their power distribution systems. Their coordinated attack fell apart as their systems were disrupted one by one. "Direct hits," Lisa called out. "Their shield strength is dropping across the board. Their weapons are losing power." Walker straightened in his chair. This was the moment they'd planned for, the reason they'd let themselves take damage to the port side. "All batteries, fire at will. Let's end this." The Steadfast's guns opened up with everything they had. Without their shields, the coalition ships were vulnerable. Armor plating melted under the barrage, weapons were knocked offline, and engines sputtered and died. On his flagship's bridge, General Reed watched in horror as his mighty force was systematically taken apart by a single human vessel. His tactical officer was shouting something about unprecedented weapon types, about tricks and traps they'd never seen before. But Reed wasn't listening. He was thinking about how badly he'd underestimated these humans, and how that mistake was about to cost him everything. The battle was reaching its end. The coalition ships, their weapons nearly useless and their shields gone, could no longer effectively fight back. The Steadfast's superior position and carefully planned strategy had won the day. Walker looked at the destruction around them with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. It had been a costly victory. Their ship had taken damage, and people had died on both sides. But they'd proven something important today, that humans couldn't be underestimated, that superior numbers and technology weren't everything. "Sir," Mike called from communications, "we're receiving a transmission from the coalition flagship. They're surrendering." Walker nodded slowly. "Accept their surrender. Prepare boarding parties." He paused, looking at his crew. "Well done, everyone. Operation Phoenix is a success." The bridge crew cheered, but Walker kept his eyes on the view screen, watching the coalition ships power down their remaining systems. This victory would change the war, he knew. After today, no one would ever look at a damaged human ship and assume it was helpless. After today, everything would be different. The boarding parties from the Steadfast moved carefully through the coalition flagship's corridors. Their boots clanked against the metal floor as they advanced, weapons ready. Even though the ship had surrendered, no one was taking any chances. Leading the main boarding team was Commander Bill Roberts, the Steadfast's security chief. "Keep your eyes open," Bill told his team through the radio. Just because they surrendered doesn't mean everyone got the message. The coalition ship's interior was a mess. The battle had knocked out many systems, and emergency lights cast red shadows everywhere. Damaged circuits sparked in the walls, and the air smelled of burned metal. Every few minutes, the ship would groan and shake as its damaged structure settled. They encountered small groups of coalition crew members along the way, all of them sitting with their hands up, following surrender protocols. Bill's team quickly secured each group, treating them firmly but fairly. They weren't here for revenge. They were professionals doing their job. Back on the Steadfast bridge, Captain Walker was coordinating the entire operation. The view screen showed multiple camera feeds from the boarding teams, along with status updates from around both ships. "Sir," Lisa called from her station, "we're picking up some unusual readings from the coalition ship's engine room. Could be a self-destruct sequence." Walker's expression hardened. "Get me Commander Roberts immediately." Bill's voice came through quickly. "Roberts here, sir." "Bill, you need to get to their engine room now. We're reading possible self-destruct preparations." "Copy that." "Team 2 with me." Bill's team double-timed it through the corridors, following the ship's markings toward engineering. They encountered more resistance here. A group of coalition engineers who hadn't accepted the surrender. A brief firefight broke out, but the human team's superior training showed. They quickly subdued the engineers without any casualties. In the engine room, they found what they were looking for. 3 coalition officers were working frantically at a control panel, trying to override their own safety systems. Bill's team burst in, weapons raised. "Step away from the controls," Bill ordered. "Hands where we can see them." 2 of the officers complied immediately, but the third kept working, his fingers flying over the controls. Bill didn't hesitate. He fired a stun round that dropped the officer before he could finish whatever he was doing. "Engine room secured," Bill reported. "We've got some would-be heroes down here, but the situation is under control." On the bridge of his captured flagship, General Reed sat under guard, watching as human crews efficiently took control of his vessel. His pride was as damaged as his ship, But he was also curious. He'd never seen anything like the tactics the humans had used today. Captain Walker entered the bridge, his uniform neat despite the recent battle. He walked straight to Reed, studying the coalition general with interest. "Your reputation for tactical brilliance is well earned," Reed admitted grudgingly. "I didn't think humans were capable of such deception." Walker smiled slightly. "That's exactly what we counted on, General. Your belief in our inferiority was your weakness. We just had to play to your expectations." Reed nodded slowly. "The damage to your ship, it was all fake. A trap." "Months of preparation," Walker confirmed. "Every blast mark, every piece of debris, carefully designed to hide our real capabilities. We studied your salvage protocols, learned exactly how you'd approach a disabled vessel. Then we just had to wait for the right target." The general's expression showed a mix of anger and respect. "And those devices you used, the ones that disabled our shields, we've never seen anything like them. Human ingenuity, General. We can't always match your technology, so we find ways around it." Speaking of which, Walker turned to one of his officers. "How's the data retrieval coming?" "Very well, sir," the officer replied. "Their computers are providing a wealth of information. Battle plans, fleet movements, technical specifications. It's all there." Reed's face fell as he realized the full extent of the disaster. Not only had he lost 3 ships to a single human vessel, but now the humans would have access to coalition military secrets. This defeat would have consequences far beyond this single battle. Meanwhile, in the Steadfast's medical bay, doctors treated wounded from both sides. The human medics worked just as hard to save coalition lives as they did their own crew members. Several coalition soldiers watched in surprise as their injured comrades received the same level of care as the humans. One coalition officer, being treated for a burned arm, spoke quietly to his human doctor. "We were told humans were savages," he said, "that you didn't value life like we did. But I'm seeing something very different." The doctor smiled as she wrapped his arm. "There's a lot about humans you've been told that isn't true. Maybe it's time your people learned who we really are." Back on the bridge, Walker was receiving updates from throughout both ships. The situation was under control, but there was still a lot of work to be done. The disabled coalition vessel needed to be salvaged, prisoners had to be processed, and their own damage needed repairs. "Sir," Lisa called out, "long-range sensors are picking up more coalition ships. Looks like a response to the distress call that got out before we jammed communications." Walker nodded. They'd expected this. Time to arrival. "At least 6 hours at their current speed. More than enough time. Start downloading everything we can from their computers." "Tom, how are the repairs coming?" "We can be back at full fighting strength in 4 hours, Captain. The damage wasn't as bad as it looked." Walker turned to General Reed. "Your reinforcements will find empty space, General. We'll be long gone, along with all your ship's data and some very interesting coalition technology samples." Reed looked at him sharply. "You're not going to destroy my ships." "No need," Walker replied. "By the time your forces arrive, we'll have stripped them of anything useful. The empty hulks we leave behind will be a message, a reminder that underestimating humans is a costly mistake." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. The Steadfast's crews worked efficiently, downloading data, collecting technology samples, and making repairs. They also helped stabilize the coalition ships, ensuring no lives would be lost after they departed. As the deadline approached, Walker made one final tour of his ship, checking on his crew and the prisoners. He found them talking to each other, sharing stories and experiences. Despite being enemies, they were starting to see each other as people rather than just opponents. "It's time," Walker announced when he returned to the bridge. "Begin withdrawal procedures. Let's get our prize home." The Steadfast's engines powered up, their steady hum filling the ship. As they pulled away from the coalition vessels, Walker looked at the battlefield one last time. It had been a victory beyond their wildest expectations, not just in terms of military success, but in changing perceptions on both sides. "Send a message to command," he told Mike. "Operation Phoenix successful. Tell them everything is about to change." The Steadfast jumped into hyperspace, leaving behind 3 damaged coalition ships and countless shattered assumptions about human capabilities. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The Steadfast emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human-controlled space. 3 patrol ships immediately moved to intercept them, but backed off when they received the victory codes. Captain Walker watched as the patrol vessels formed an honor escort around his ship. Word of their success had traveled fast. In the ship's main holding area, General Reed sat with his senior officers, all under guard but treated with respect. They were watching a news broadcast that one of the guards had allowed them to see. The coalition leadership was in chaos, trying to explain how 3 of their best ships had been captured by a single human vessel. "They're already calling it the Phoenix Gambit," one of Reed's officers said quietly. "Our entire military doctrine is being questioned. Everything we thought we knew about human capabilities was wrong." Reed nodded slowly. "We became too confident, too set in our ways. We stopped innovating because we thought we were superior. The humans never stopped thinking, never stopped finding new ways to fight." The guard watching them was surprised by their conversation. He'd expected anger or resentment, not this kind of analytical acceptance of defeat. Maybe the coalition forces weren't as arrogant as they'd been led to believe. On the bridge, Walker was in a secure communication with Fleet Command. The faces of 5 admirals looked back at him from the screen, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and concern. "The data you recovered is invaluable," Admiral Stone was saying. "Their fleet movements, their technology specs, this could change the entire course of the war. But there's something else, something we need you to know." Walker leaned forward. "What is it, sir?" "Your victory has had an unexpected effect. We're receiving communications from multiple coalition worlds. It seems your treatment of the prisoners, combined with the shocking defeat of their best ships, has caused some serious political upheaval. There are calls for peace talks." Walker absorbed this news with surprise. They'd hoped to prove humans couldn't be easily defeated, but triggering peace talks, that was beyond their wildest expectations. "There's more," another admiral added. "Some of the coalition's client races are reconsidering their allegiance. They've seen that the coalition isn't invincible. Some are already reaching out to us about possible alliances." In the ship's engineering section, Tom was working with a team of technicians to analyze the coalition technology they'd captured. Some of it was more advanced than human tech, but not in the ways they'd expected. "Look at this," he said to his team, pointing at a power coupling. "They focused so much on raw power that they forgot about efficiency. We could help them improve this by at least 30% just by redesigning the flow regulators." One of his engineers looked up in surprise. "Help them? They're the enemy." Tom shook his head. "Maybe not for much longer. And if we're going to have peace someday, we need to understand each other, both our strengths and our weaknesses." Throughout the ship, similar scenes were playing out. Human crew members and coalition prisoners were talking, sharing stories, finding out that they had more in common than they'd thought. The artificial barriers of propaganda and prejudice were starting to break down. In the medical bay, the coalition wounded were recovering well, thanks to the combination of human and coalition medical techniques. The human doctors had learned some valuable lessons from coalition medical technology, while the coalition medics were impressed by human surgical innovations. "Your people adapt so quickly," a coalition medical officer said to the human chief surgeon. "We spend years perfecting a single technique, but you're always trying new approaches, combining different methods." The surgeon smiled. "That's because we had to. We couldn't match your technology, so we had to get creative. Sometimes having less makes you learn more." Walker was in his ready room, reviewing the after-action reports, when Lisa buzzed him. "Sir, you need to see this. We're picking up massive fleet movements from coalition space." He rushed to the bridge, where the tactical display showed dozens of coalition fleet elements on the move. But they weren't advancing. They were pulling back, consolidating their forces. "They're scared," Lisa said wonderingly. "They don't know if there are more ships like us out there, more traps waiting to be sprung. They're actually retreating from contested systems." Walker studied the display thoughtfully. "They're not just retreating. They're creating space for negotiations. They want to talk, but they need to save face. This way they can claim they're repositioning their forces, not running away." In the ship's mess hall, human crew members had invited some of the coalition prisoners to share a meal. It was against regulations, but Walker had approved it. He understood the importance of these small gestures. "Your food is interesting," a coalition officer said, "trying what the humans call pizza. We never mix flavors like this. Everything in our culture is meant to be pure, separate." "Maybe that's the real difference between us," a human crew member replied. "We believe that mixing things up, trying new combinations, makes everything better, even if it gets messy sometimes." The next few days were filled with debriefings, data analysis, and preparations for their arrival at Earth. The coalition prisoners would be transferred to a secure facility, but already there was talk of them serving as cultural advisors for the peace negotiations. Walker spent time with General Reed, learning about coalition culture and sharing insights about humanity. They were building a foundation of understanding that could prove crucial in the days ahead. "Your trap was brilliant," Reed admitted during one of their talks. "But it was more than just the tactical victory. You showed us something we didn't expect: humanity. Your people treated mine with respect, even after defeating us. That's not how our propaganda said you would behave." Walker nodded. "Maybe that's the biggest trap we sprung, showing you who we really are, not who you thought we were." As they approached Earth, Walker gathered his crew for one final address. They stood in the ship's largest cargo bay, humans and coalition prisoners alike, all listening. "What we achieved goes beyond military victory," he told them. "We proved that courage, creativity, and compassion are more powerful than any weapon. We showed that enemies can become friends, that understanding is better than fear. Whatever happens next, remember this: change starts with people willing to think differently, to take chances, to see beyond old prejudices." The crew applauded, and to everyone's surprise, so did many of the coalition prisoners. Something had changed in these few days. A glimpse of what might be possible if both sides could move past their fears and assumptions. As Earth grew larger in their view screens, Walker thought about everything that had led to this moment. The months of planning, the risks they'd taken, the lives affected by their actions. They'd set out to prove humans couldn't be underestimated, but they'd accomplished something far more important. They'd opened the door to peace, shown that different species could learn from each other, work together, find common ground. The real victory wasn't in the battle they'd won, but in the future they'd made possible. 6 months had passed since the Steadfast's historic victory. The Great Hall of the Earth Defense Command was filled with representatives from both human and coalition worlds. Captain Walker stood at attention in his dress uniform, watching as human and coalition leaders signed the preliminary peace accords. The journey to this moment had been challenging. After the Steadfast returned to Earth, both sides had to overcome decades of mistrust and propaganda. But the seeds planted during those few days after the battle had grown into something remarkable. General Reed, no longer a prisoner but now serving as the coalition's chief diplomatic advisor, stood nearby. He caught Walker's eye and gave a slight nod. They'd come a long way from that day when Reed had thought he was capturing a helpless vessel. The signing ceremony ended with applause from both sides. As the crowd began to mingle, Walker found himself surrounded by his old crew members, all specially invited for this historic occasion. "Hard to believe it all started with us playing dead in space," Tom said, grinning. He'd been promoted to chief engineer of the entire Earth Defense Fleet, his innovations with coalition technology leading to remarkable improvements in human ships. Lisa, now heading the new Joint Species Technical Exchange Program, nodded in agreement. The best trap we set wasn't the fake damage or the hidden weapons. It was making them see us as people, not just enemies. The success of the Phoenix Gambit, as it had come to be known, had changed military doctrine throughout known space. No one took anything at face value anymore. But more importantly, it had taught both sides the value of looking beneath the surface, of questioning their assumptions about each other. Walker watched as human and coalition children played together in one corner of the hall, part of a new cultural exchange program. They didn't see aliens or enemies. They just saw new friends to play with. It was a powerful symbol of what the future could hold. "Captain Walker," a voice called. He turned to find Admiral Stone approaching with several coalition officials. "These gentlemen would like to discuss your new assignment." Walker raised an eyebrow. This was the first he'd heard of any new assignment. The Admiral smiled. "We're forming a joint task force," one of the coalition officials explained. "A combined fleet of human and coalition ships working together to explore deep space. After seeing how your crew handled first contact situations and cultural exchanges, we believe you're the perfect choice to lead it." The implications were enormous. A joint fleet, sharing technology and expertise, learning from each other's strengths. It was more than just a military operation. It was a statement about the future both sides wanted to build. In another part of the hall, the Steadfast's medical team was deep in discussion with coalition medical officers. The exchange of medical knowledge had already saved thousands of lives on both sides. What had started as battlefield medicine had grown into a comprehensive program of shared research and development. "Remember how surprised they were when we first treated their wounded?" the chief surgeon asked, smiling at the memory. "Now we're planning joint hospitals on 3 different worlds." The changes weren't limited to military and medical cooperation. Trade routes were opening up between human and coalition worlds. Cultural exchanges were becoming common. People on both sides were learning each other's languages, customs, and ways of thinking. Bill, the Steadfast's former security chief, was now training the first mixed human coalition security teams. "It's amazing," he told Walker. "They're learning our adaptability, and we're learning their discipline. Together, we're better than either of us were alone." As the evening wore on, Walker found himself on a balcony overlooking the city. General Reed joined him there, both of them contemplating the lights below. "You know what the history books will say?" Reed asked. "They'll say the war ended because of a clever military trap. But we know it was more than that." Walker nodded. "It was about seeing past our fears and prejudices, about realizing that different doesn't mean inferior or superior. It just means different." "My people are learning that lesson," Reed said. "Slowly, but they're learning. Your victory showed us that there's strength in flexibility, in being willing to change and adapt. We've become too rigid, too sure of ourselves." Inside the hall, a group of scientists was presenting the latest results of joint human coalition research projects. The combination of coalition precision and human creativity was leading to breakthroughs neither side could have achieved alone. "Look at that," Tom said, pointing to a display showing a new type of engine. Coalition power systems combined with human control interfaces. 5 years ago, we were trying to blow each other up. Now we're building the future together. The new engine was just one example. Everywhere you looked, the cooperation between humans and coalition was producing remarkable results. Agriculture, medicine, space exploration, environmental protection. Every field was advancing faster than ever before. Walker's old crew had scattered to different assignments now, each playing their part in building this new future. But they still got together regularly to remember that mission, to talk about how a single battle had changed everything. "You know what I think the real turning point was?" Lisa said during one of these gatherings. "It wasn't when we sprung the trap. It wasn't even when we won the battle. It was afterward, when both sides realized we had more to gain by working together than by fighting each other." As the peace ceremony drew to a close, Walker prepared to address the gathered dignitaries. He looked out at the mixed audience, humans and coalition members sitting together, talking, laughing, sharing ideas. It was everything they'd hoped for and more. 6 months ago, he began, we proved that appearances can be deceiving. A seemingly disabled ship turned out to be a powerful weapon. But we learned something far more important. We learned that old enemies can become new allies, that different ways of thinking can complement each other, that the future belongs to those who are willing to look past their prejudices and see new possibilities. He paused, looking at his old crew members, at General Reed, at all the people who had helped make this moment possible. The Phoenix Gambit wasn't just about military deception. It was about revealing truth, the truth that we're all capable of change, of growth, of seeing beyond our assumptions. Today, as we sign these accords, we're not just ending a war. We're beginning a journey together, one that will take us further than either of us could go alone. The applause that followed came from humans and coalition members alike. As Walker looked out at the crowd, he remembered that moment 6 months ago, when his ship had appeared dead in space, waiting to spring its trap. They'd achieved their military objective that day, but they'd also started something much bigger. The war was over. The future was beginning, and it looked brighter than anyone could have imagined.